I am going to get hurt again from somebody. Sure. So I'm at the point where I'm like, you hurt me, hurt people. And so I know I'm going to bring it to the Lord, shrug it off my shoulder and keep going. I'm not going to allow it to ever bring me back to that state of darkness.
Hey guys, welcome to the CA podcast. I'm Chad and I'm with Alexis.
Hey.
So today we're going to talk about kind of a tough topic, I think. It's a touchy subject.
Yes.
Which is church hurt.
Yes.
So how have you dealt with and managed church hurt? Because you've been in church for like your whole life, kind of, right?
Yes.
Basically?
Yes, on and off.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so same with me. So very similar in that sense. But how have you dealt with and kind of managed church hurt and been healed from it and kind of walked that journey?
I feel like that's such a loaded
It's loaded.
question,
Yeah, it's so much.
So for myself personally and my husband, our family, I was intentional with it because we came across a season where we literally had no one left. Wow. And so I'm a very extroverted person, and I'm like, I need people. Yeah. And I mean, before I didn't need people. When I was in the thick of the church hurt, I was like, I don't need anybody. Course, I got me. They don't have me. So I don't need anybody.
So you went from really needing people to me basically being like,
yes, which is not me at all.
That's crazy.
But then I got to the point where I was so depressed always and just always feeling like I was drowning. So I'm like, God, this is not working. That something has to change. Yeah. And so my husband and I were intentional with it. And we were like, we thought the answer was finding a spiritual father or spiritual parents at the time because we didn't have a covering. Okay. And so because we were at the point where we were like, I don't even want to go to church. Yeah, so we didn't go to church for like 5 years.
Wow. I know. That's crazy.
5 years.
That's a long time.
Yes. And so we're like, we don't need the church. Yeah, those people that like end
up. So you got a conference hopping or?
Yes. Okay. Conference hoppers, junkies, whatever you want to call it.
You didn't have a home church, but you were still like going to like services basically.
Yes. Well, we tried to start our own thing.
Okay. Yeah.
But it wasn't a church. It was like a equipping center, we called it, like a revival type hub. Sure. Where we're going to do it on a Saturday, not Sunday. We're going to buck the system. So people that go to church can come to our thing and then go back to their church. Yeah.
So you're not like stealing people from churches.
Right. So we thought we were the hot stuff. Yeah. So we tried to do that, but we had no covering. We didn't really know what we were doing. We had friends that we were doing it with, but in the end, they ended up leaving as well. Wow. So then that's when I'm like, nothing works. We tried to do this revival thing. It didn't work. We tried to do it on our own. We tried to do it with people. None of it worked. Wow. So we're like, Lord, what do you want us to do? And so we started the conference hopping and trying to find a spiritual father. Right. And we found out that you can only have one at the time. So we're like, man, we have to make sure it's the right one. So long story short, we ended up finding someone like a prophet that poured into us. And he's like, what you really need is a church family. And of course, that word, when he said that, I was like, I was like, church, I have to go back to the local church. And he was trying to paint a picture to us, the importance of the local church. Yeah. So it was hard at first, but we're like, I guess we'll come with you to visit a church and see what it's like. Right. So we went. And it was in a little town in West Virginia. And we ended up loving it. It felt like family. That's awesome. And that was the missing link that we had was family. Oh, that's good. So I still didn't overcome the church hurt, even though we were immersed in family. Right. We ended up moving from Texas to West Virginia. But you repositioned
yourself more or less.
We postured ourselves. Yeah. And so because of that, I feel like the Lord was like, okay, now that you're back on track, now that you're back in the will of God, I'm going to start to place people in your life to help you on your journey of healing. Yeah. Because I was like, okay, now I need to heal. Right. And so we were around the people. We were in church again, but I didn't want anything to do with people still. I had my walls up and I'm like, I'm not letting anybody in. I don't want that to happen again. And so I was a tough cookie to crack.
So like when you were there, like were you still kind of a little bit like when you first came there, a little apprehensive? Like and it kind of felt weird.
Side-eyeing people, like what do you want? You want to take advantage or?
Yeah, so that's what when I like, did you feel like people wanted things from you? Like I
thought there was a motive with everybody.
Yeah, that's what I would get at.
And so I'm like, why do you want to be my friend?
How did you overcome that specifically?
So I really had to say, okay, Lord, if I fully trust in you, I got to trust that where you placed us. Right. I'll be able to open up and trust that those people have my best interest at heart. So slow by slow, I would share my story.
Right.
And I think the more that I became vulnerable, the more
opened yourself up.
I opened myself up. And so I think that was the key. The more I became vulnerable with people and not hold anything back, because I carried a lot of shame from that situation. Yeah. And so the more I shared my story, the more the shame broke off and the more I was able to be real. And now I'm at the point where I'm like, you could be my friend. Yeah, you don't have to be my friend. Yeah. But I'm going to be me.
Yeah. Well, because I think now it's so funny because like you're very open now. Like when I met you, you're
too
very open. Yeah. Like you're describing this Alexis that I don't know. Like I've never met. So it's crazy to me. So like, do you feel like, and you kind of said there, but like, when you started opening yourself up, do you feel like that like kind of grace came every time? Like, do you feel like it was like something where like every time you opened yourself up, did you kind of have to force through it, or did you start feeling more free? Like, kind of what was the process with that? Because I know a lot of people deal with that. So.
Right. So I knew that people were telling me you have to be more open in order to have friends and to like do the back and forth thing. So you're open and they're open, and then you find out who you gel with.
Yeah, it's like
but I didn't know what that was like. I was like, I don't know how to do that. Wow. And so it wasn't until I had to break shame off when I realized, okay, I have shame. I broke shame off. Then the healing process began to happen, and I was able to be vulnerable. I didn't know what vulnerability looked like or intimacy because of that shame.
Yeah.
So it caused me to want to hide from people because I'm like, if they see the real me, they're not going to like me. Right. And so with the church hurt thing, I'm like, I just don't want to open up because I don't want you guys to see me and then crush that and then use it against me in the future.
Because you had been through a pretty traumatic experience where that had kind of happened, and you got hurt through that process. And so like with that, like what are some other things that you kind of needed healing from that had been kind of, you know, I guess perverted, or like just things that had kind of like I guess because like you're saying there, like how you kind of felt like people were trying to use things against you, and what were some other things that you feel like that kind of God has healed you from, or that you've walked through?
So another thing in that area was submitting to authority. I had so much rebellion. I wanted to buck the system. And so I'm like, you're not going to tell me what to do. You're my covering, but I don't know you. I don't trust you.
Right.
I couldn't even look my spiritual leaders in the eyes and stuff. So it was just stuff like that I realized, man, I have a lot of issues.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, in order for me to be free and move forward, because I overthought everything.
Right.
Every move that I made, there was just so many insecurities. And so it wasn't until I was like, okay, Lord, like I said, with the trust, I trust in you. So I'm going to start on this process. And so I became vulnerable with them as well. And I told them, I'm like, I don't know what this is, but I can't look you in the eye. I'm like, I can't look you in the eye. I don't know what it is, but I have a problem with authority. So it just was being real with that. And the more I was real, the more they understood me. So they were able to work with me.
Wow. And so let me ask you this. So with this, did you have this issue because you had submitted to authority before and been abused by it? Or how did that work? Like, were you under someone previously and that's why you had the church hurt? Or like, does that kind of make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it had to do with my upbringing, and it wasn't my parents. It was more like the environment I grew up in. I grew up in a liberal state.
Yes.
So in Rhode Island and New England, it's very liberal. And the women, Miss Independent, you do your own thing.
Yeah.
So that was instilled in me.
Okay.
But then because of the whole aspect with the leadership, with the church hurt, I was under an authority where they did use stuff against me and manipulation. And so because of that, I was like, this is even more so why. I don't want to be under anybody.
That makes sense. So now, what do you feel like, and so it's kind of a twofold thing, is when you're walking through this, what are the things that you experienced when you got freedom? In the sense of what were the things that were holding you back from? Like the things that you were maybe not opportunities, or like things that you feel like the church hurt was basically like almost like a wall between you and like things. Like what do you feel like now that you've experienced the freedom, what are you walking in now that you didn't have access to beforehand?
A confidence.
Yeah.
A confidence. And because I know who I am, I'm like, no one can steal what God has put on the inside of me. And so because of that, whenever someone says the otherwise, the enemy or people or anybody, friends, I'm like, well, that's not what my God says. And I'm at the place where I'm like, you know that saying where it says no one can make you feel inferior without your consent. So I feel like because I know what I walk in, I'm like, you can say one thing, but I know another.
You know where you stand.
Yes. And so I am going to get hurt again from somebody. So I'm at the point where I'm like, you hurt me, hurt people.
Yeah.
And so I know I'm going to bring it to the Lord,
Yeah.
shrug it off my shoulder and keep going. I'm not going to allow it to ever bring me back to that state of darkness.
That's good. That's good because you know where you came from now.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, I overcame and I know that I can overcome now.
Yeah, that's good. So now you were talking before about the evangelism thing. So you want to share on that a little bit?
Yes. Yeah. So the church hurt that I experienced was a part of an evangelistic ministry. And so because I got hurt with that, I didn't want anything to do with evangelism, which it doesn't make sense because you're like, that has nothing to do with the people and with God.
But it's the covering. You're covering.
Yeah,
no, that makes sense.
So for years, I knew I needed to evangelize, and the Lord would tug on my heart, and then I would always push it away. So it got to the point where I didn't feel it anymore. I was hard. I had a hard heart.
Wow.
And so my husband and people around would be like, what happened to that desire? I'm like, it's not there. I'm like, I don't want to do it, which is crazy because when you don't pour out to others, and I'm like, souls are on the line, then you know there's something wrong in your alignment.
Yeah.
And so I got to the point where one day my pastor or our pastor at the church said, he brought up something with evangelism. And he's like, the Lord is going to bring back that desire for evangelism that you have, that gift.
Wow.
And I broke down, found out it was a hard heart, repented, and asked the Lord to help me feel again. And he did. And so now I have a burden for souls.
That's good.
And I'm able to, we're leading a group. My husband and I are leading a group at the church with evangelism. So,
and y'all are doing great. I mean, it's crazy. Like, see you with the laundromat, and all that stuff. And it's like, wow, like, it's crazy that, like, because you guys are really good at it. Like, you guys are good at sharing your faith. And it's so funny that that's what the devil attacked, right?
Right. The very thing.
That was literally just a covering. And use it to just basically try to block you from what you're really good at, what you guys are succeeding at, and that you're seeing fruit from. And it's like, how crazy is it that, like, behind that obedience of being healed from that, now, like, there's so much fruit on the other side.
Yeah.
And the whole time, like, it was there, but, like, you were being blocked by that kind of, I guess you can call it a fear, you can call it whatever. And it's like, wow, like, look at what the fruit is now.
Yeah,
it's so incredible.
And the way I can explain it is almost like there was a huge gray cloud in front of the sun that was supposed to be shining in my life to be able to help in that area.
Yeah.
And I love to share that story because I'm like, there's so many people that get offended from church and from people that they literally allow it to turn into bitterness and they just are stagnant.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, there is a way and you can overcome.
Yeah. And I think the thing too is, like, normally what offends us is sometimes our assignment.
Yeah,
like, and that's the very thing with you, like, you know. And I think because you're a bubbly person, and, like, that's how, like, people can come to the Lord, because, like, you're talking to them and encouraging them and just being what you are. And that was what was being locked up.
Yes.
And it's just so crazy now to see, like,
devil.
Yeah. And it's just so funny because it's like, look at where you're at now and look at all the lives you're impacting now. And that was what the devil attacked, and he attacked it through church hurt. He attacked it through hurt feelings, you know. And I think sometimes we put, like, a low, people are like almost look down on people that have church hurt, and it's like, no, but, like, it's a real thing. It's a mental war that you're having to wage, and it's like, you know, I understand that people have walked through it and they're like, oh, you know, it's not a big deal. It's like, no, but it is a big deal, because, like, look at what happened when you overcame it.
Right.
And, like, I get, like, you know, you say it doesn't exist and all that stuff, but it's like, it existed for you.
Yeah.
Because, like, you look at the way I see it too is, like, you look at your life before and after, just even coming here, just like you're saying, just moving here. The fact that, like, I don't even know the person that you're referring to.
Right.
Like, I know you as this bubbly person, this person that loves evangelism, that loves reaching out to people. And you're telling me, like, 2 years ago, you weren't that person.
Yeah.
And that's crazy to me.
Right.
And it's like, that's how much the work the Lord has done.
Yes.
In just basically a 2-year span, right? Like, more or less. And 2-3 year span. It's like, wow, like, that's the encouragement for people out there.
Yes.
Like, you can get healed, you can get set free from church hurt, and what it takes is just stepping out. Yeah. That's what you did.
And dealt with all the stuff that surfaced. I'm like, okay, I can't stay there.
Exactly. Like, you confronted those things.
Forgave and did all the things.
So
and so because of that, the Lord fast tracked me, I think.
You know, I think so. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Like, to think of all the things you've done since then, and all the growth you've seen, it was a fast track for sure.
Yes, and it was a whole 7 years that we didn't go to church, or 5 years, but 7 years that I didn't evangelize and all those different things.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, Lord, I feel like I'm behind, but I pressed in. I dealt with all the stuff that came to the surface. I forgave.
Right.
I was in my word. And so because of that, I really think that he catapulted me.
That's good.
And made up for all the years that was lost.
Yeah, that's really good. So what do you think was probably the hardest thing to overcome? Like when you've walked through the whole process, like what do you think the hardest things to overcome in this kind of like bubble of church hurt?
I think the hardest thing for me was to let people back in.
Yeah.
And to trust people fully without thinking there was something underlying.
Yeah.
Well, because I have a strong discernment, so I can see motive sometimes.
Right. And you've talked about that before. Like how you're able to see like behind people's things. And so now, so obviously that hasn't changed. You can still see people's motives. What have you done inside yourself? Like, do you just look past it? Like, how do you deal with that? Because like, you still see that and still have discernment. So how do you, if you feel like someone's maybe trying to, get around or whatever, kind of, take advantage of you, do you just let them in? Like, how do you process that?
So someone gave me some good piece of advice and they're like, you should categorize people A, B, and C. And he's like, okay, so some people you give their all. You show all of you. B, you show some of it, but not all. Right. And then C is the least access to you and to your heart.
Right.
So I started to follow that. But also with the discernment thing, when I see there's a motive, I found that there's power in prayer. So I'll pray for that person. I'll pray for the Lord to help me, because before I didn't know how to separate the problem from the person. Yeah. So I would just like kind of cut them off. But now I'm like, okay, I see that thing. I'm going to pray for them, but I'm also going to note that I see that thing, but I'm also not going to cut them off. I'm going to pray for them and separate the problem from the person.
Yeah. No, that's really good. That's really good. Yeah.
Yes.
So you have anything else you want to share about that, or you feel like,
tell the Lord and show and yourself that you can overcome, and you can go on a healing journey to overcome those things when you are real to God, real to yourself, and real to those around you. Yeah, and so with you, now we're going to flip it. So yours was the opposite.
Yeah.
Mine was intentional. You said that yours with the church hurt, the area of church hurt, you overcame by
just kind of just being like, so I focused on, in the very beginning, I focused on forgiving. So that was the thing I was intentional about was, I had a list of people that, it's not that I think it's one of those things where like, I look back and I'm like, there were definitely things that I did that caused the church hurt. And so like that I was like, okay. And then there were other things where people just said things to me that were just outlandish. And we're like, what in the world was that? Like, it was like a demon manifested.
Yes.
And I saw that multiple times, leadership and, people, peers. And so the one thing I did when I came here was I decided two things. I decided that I wasn't going to let people muzzle me anymore. And that was the one thing, because I had let people muzzle me, and that caused the church hurt.
So basically, like, make decisions for you.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I had allowed people to dictate what I said, how I said it, and decision making, and that caused church hurt. And I realized it was me. Like I was the one that was muzzling myself, because I was allowing people to basically like, no, like, and never speaking out, never saying. So that's why I decided, right? And then the second thing was to forgive the people. And so I went on the little journey of that. It didn't take long. I just had been like, okay, God, like I give this to you. Like I don't need to carry this anymore. These people really, they're not in my life anymore in these regards. But like, you know what? Here, like, so I just give it. And not that I forgot about it, but it was one of those things where I felt a release, right? So then as I go on, there were just thing after thing that would go on where I would have something happen, and it would normally bring a visceral reaction, like something that I would be like, oh, what, like, it was like something I was drawing on, and it was gone. And I would realize it was that reaction was gone. And I was like, oh, I'm healed, like from that. And now, obviously, that one thing that when I came here, I was super cynical. Not saying that I'm not cynical now, but I was super cynical about the church, about organized religion. Like that was my problem. Was like I was like, man, like these pastors are driving around in these $100,000 cars, and like that was my thing, right? And it's like they're paying their staff pennies on the dollar. They're driving around and all this stuff. That was my.
You
problem.
were one of those? I was
yeah. Oh, 100% one of those. Because I was working on a staff where I'm getting paid. I mean, I could barely make rent. And my pastor's pulling in with the sports cars. It's like, what? Are you kidding me? And so like that was my problem, and it wasn't really hurt as much as it was like. I don't know, like almost kind of like, come on, like, like I like, why is this a thing? And so like, and I would have friends that weren't saved that would like combat and be like, well, I just don't understand why pastors need rich cars and stuff. I'm like, you know what? Yeah, I agree with you. Like, and so it was one of those things, but and then so I kind of just had to give that stuff up. But then what I realized was when that stuff started coming up, I was like, no, well, why wouldn't God bless them? Like, why would, if they want a boat, if they want a sports car, why is that a problem? If they want a mansion, if God gave it to them, why? So then I 180. But the thing is like, it was after the forgiveness where I just realized, like, I just started having my mindset started shifting. So it was more or less of a thing where, like, all the things that I would typically react in like a bad way, in a sarcastic way, or just whatever, I started having a mind shift.
Right. That's good.
And so one of the things is that really kind of was a problem was my grandfather passed away right before Easter. It was my first year at a church, and basically, I basically more or less was told couldn't go to the funeral because it was on Saturday. A big egg hunt. We had a service the next day, 3 services, big production.
That's like the whole in the church world. That's like the biggest.
That's
weekend.
The pinnacle, right?
Right.
And so to be honest, a lot of family hurt happened over that because I couldn't go to the funeral.
Oh man.
And it was tough. It was really tough. It was tough for my grandmother. It was tough for me. It was tough for my parents. And so I grinned and bared it, did the egg on. What's so funny about it now looking back is that was the day I met my wife.
Oh.
So hilariously enough.
Wow, through that.
The Saturday, the funeral, I happened to meet my wife at the thing, and it was just I like complimented her shoes or something, like it's something silly. But then we ended up developing a relationship, ended up dating about a month later. But the crazy thing is though, that day was marred instead of something happy like that, right? And now looking back, it was for years. It was like when that time would come around, when Easter would come around, I just
you had like Easter. This bitterness.
Yeah, I had a bitterness towards Easter because my that happened, and it was such a problem, and so like for me, and it was undealt with,
right?
And I didn't realize it was so crazy because, and this is what I'm talking about, kind of the unintentional thing is like I didn't realize it was a problem. Except because Easter only comes around once a year.
Right.
So it was one of those things where it was just like, I just hate it. I was like, whatever. Like, it was like, oh, souls are getting saved. I'm like, okay, well, how many videos are I going to make? Let's just get this over.
It was like, it was more like the productive side that you were on.
Yeah. That's all it was. It was just like, all right, let's just get this over with.
So you were almost going through the motion?
Yeah, 100%. And you think like, I mean, sitting here watching, altar call with 106 people getting saved. And I'm just like,
numb.
All right, when can I go home? Yeah. Yeah. Like, and that was my attitude. And it's like, that was my problem. Like that's something I did. And so, nobody did that to me,
right?
You can categorize it as church hurt, but that's something that I held on to for no reason. And so time went on, and about I think it was last Easter, I'm sitting there and realizing that I was happy, I was excited about the Easter service, was excited, and someone said, "Man, like you sound like you are like better, like that you like," and someone was just like, "You sound like you're like kind of free from all your like funk." And I was like, "Oh yeah, like I am." Like, and I realized like, oh wow, I'm happy for the first time. And I mean, it was, almost 8 years, 7 years. I was actually happy during Easter, like excited about an Easter service. And it's so funny. And it was like going all the way back. I mean, you trace it 7, 8 years and you go, that's when something so simple, so minute got into me and just corrupted me. And it wasn't like something, and like I said, I didn't really even seek out being healed from it, but through the forgiveness and through just every time something came up, I was just like, okay, you know what? I forgive that person.
Wow.
And there were so many moments where like, there were people that had kind of, you could say wronged me or just I got butted heads with or whatever.
Right.
And, I'd had people text me and apologize.
Wow.
Out of the blue. Hadn't talked to them in years. And they just, hey, I just want to apologize for how this went down and this went down. And it was like, I forgave them. And then that happened.
Wow.
And so I think that was the biggest thing for me is because, I still served at church and had no problem opening up to people. But my problem always was kind of like with what you were saying, like the motive thing. I struggle with that too. And so there was a conference about a year ago, Prophet Kevin came and he basically was like, you're skeptical still of things.
That's a good word to describe it, skepticism.
Yeah. And he's like, and so what he did was he called pastor on the stage and had me put my ear to his heart and say, I want to hear the heart of my leader.
Aww.
And what's crazy
I remember that.
Yeah. And what's crazy is a year later, you look at how much involved I am now in church.
Yes.
Like, and I love it. And like, that's what I wanted to do. But like, I didn't even realize until he called it out what it was. I didn't realize it was a skepticism because there was always a wall holding me back, and I didn't know what it was. It was skepticism. And so, but like as soon as it came up, I was like, okay, free me from like I don't want to be like immediately. As soon as it really like he brought that up, I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what it is.
Right.
Because I mean, at that point, like he called out all this stuff that he couldn't have known, and it was like all so accurate. And then like that was the one like negative thing. It was like, hey, you have this, you did this, you did that, but this is your problem.
Right.
Like, oh, okay, yeah, that's 100% my issue. So I am skeptical.
You snapped out of it.
Yeah, and it was that night, and then that was night I had the first dream that I had in like 5 years. I'd never dreamed like actually in sleep.
Wow.
I hadn't had a dream since that whole like thing. Season.
So basically shut your dreams down.
Yeah.
Wow.
And that's how I used to get like creative things and videos and visions and stuff like that was through dreams. And so it's crazy. So now I dream more and stuff like that from that. So it's about a year ago or so. But like that was the biggest thing for me was the skepticism thing. And it was through forgiveness and through that stuff that I got to the point where I was like, oh yeah, let's just get rid of it. Like, because I think had I gotten that word a year prior, I'd have been like, I'm not skeptical. Like, I would have been skeptical about the word about me being skeptical. And so I got to that point. So I think the key for me was just forgiveness.
Right.
And it was as simple as that. And then as things unraveled, it was like,
I was about to say that unraveled. It unraveled.
Yeah. I was like, oh, okay, this is what it was. You know, it was based in forgiveness. It was, and that's what the thing for me. It was probably a hard heart. And so I just kept asking God, like, make me tender towards people. Make me see that people like I asked for God to give me was I want to believe the best in people. So kind of what you were saying is with the motives,
right?
Is the thing I always say is like I want to believe the best in somebody. So if I hear something bad, if I see something bad, I want to believe whatever the scenario is, the best scenario. That's what I choose to believe.
Right.
So if it looks like that person betrayed me, you know what? Maybe they didn't betray me. Maybe they thought XYZ and they did this because of this. That's what I'm going to believe.
So basically it sounds like you got to the place where you were, was it maturity?
You know what? I think it was maturity.
Because you said it was a mindset thing. And so as we get older, we look at things differently.
Yeah. And that's a good point. Yeah. I think it was a maturity thing. I think it also was a reliance on like God, like in the sense of like saying, you know what? I can't control people. And I think maybe for a while I was hoping that like people would like side with me, right? It was kind of like a man-pleasing thing where it was like maybe people would understand where I was coming from. And I'm like, you know what? No, like everybody has their own motives. Everybody has, how they feel. And it's like people aren't going to see everything that I see.
Right.
So it was my expectation levels too of people where I was viewing leaders in this like, and this is the thing I had talked to somebody about. They were struggling with like their leadership's like expectations they set on their leadership.
Like a pedestal or something.
Yeah. And the thing is like the sign that you're a good servant or that you're a good, say servant leader or whatever you want to call it in the church is you can watch your leader fall down. And the first reaction you have is to pick them up. Yes. That's when you know that you're healed from church.
And privately, not trying to broadcast it to everybody.
Exactly. And I think that's what I realized is when I was in that position, that's when I was free from all the craziness and all the bad mindsets and stuff like that. Like, is that you can watch a leader fall and you can say, you know what? Let's pick you back up. Right. And you know what? And I'm not going to try to come for your job. Right. I'm going to actually sit here and continue to serve you.
The person that God placed into that place. And also we're all human. Yeah. And so once 100%. We see that, then we're like, you're going to, just like I go through things, you're going to go through things as well.
Yeah, 100%. They have families, they have kids, they have crazy in-law. Like that,
and it's even worse. Yeah. Like if they have people, that amount of people they're responsible for, my goodness.
Yeah. And so like, I think that's the biggest thing is I put a false expectation on my leaders. And then I never was willing to put those expectations on myself.
Right.
And so that's what the revelation I had was, well, then if I can't live up to those expectations,
then they can't. Nobody can. Nobody can. And so when you were sharing your whole story right now, I saw like basically when you allow the enemy to plant one little seed, it could turn into this whole prison that you put yourself in. Yep. And then you're like blaming everyone else. Like it was that person. But like you said, it was really what your perception was of the whole scenario.
Mindset. Yeah. So, yeah. I mean, it's crazy. When you put it that way, it's just the one little seed, the seed of dissension. And then that what's crazy about that is that was the very beginning of my journey with that church when that happened. Wow. And so it was the first 3 months and that seed grew into the bitterness.
Like this whole huge
and it just continued and they went to the next church and it's one of those things where it's like, it's just from that one seed.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just unforgiveness from that one seed, and it
right.
just grew.
And then because what happened there, you take it to the next church, and it's like, whoa, like that church had nothing to do with it. But we bring our stuff to each thing.
Yeah, it's our baggage.
We blame them.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they're like, whoa, I had nothing to do with that.
Yeah, 100%. Yep.
But when you find the right place, they're willing to help unarm you and help get rid of that baggage.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, I mean, and that's what we've experienced here. As we experience that church, it kind of just bear hugs you.
Yeah,
and just says, you know what? Yep, okay, you're dealing with that issue right now. I'm gonna hold you a little tighter.
Yes.
You know, like,
even if you don't want it, you're resistant. They're like, you know, we're here to help, and that's the importance of the local church is to be able to open up or when we're shut down, they extend their arms. And they're able to help us flourish to get to that place where we flourish again and thrive.
Really good. Yeah, I mean,
so even with both of our stories, I can tell with you too a difference from when you first came.
Yeah.
And so
it's crazy.
It's powerful how we can overcome church hurt.
Right. Yeah.
So I don't know if you want to encourage the people with that.
Yeah.
Through your story of how they can overcome as well.
I mean, just open yourself up. Be willing to just say, okay, these are the things that I've done wrong, because that's one of the biggest things that I had to realize was I had some responsibility in how I was hurt. And so I had to forgive people. And so if you're out there, just you know, if you got to write a list down of all the things that you are hurt over, do that, you know, and then ask God for forgiveness for being upset at those people, and then forgive those people. And if that means you got to send them a text, you got to send them a phone call, because it could be as simple as a text.
Yeah.
And you say, hey man, like, you know, I'm sorry for the way this happened. You know, hope things can be better. Because even what's crazier is I have relationships now that I lost. I have them again through that. And so that's what I encourage you with today is that there's things that you lost, like the devil stole relationships from you, and you can get them back.
Right.
And it starts with forgiveness. It starts with something. It's an action that you have to do.
Right.
And so that's my thing today. So
that's good. I like that. Like the two different perspectives.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
And so I had fun.
Yeah, it's great. So
and I'm sure we'll hit on this again. There's so much more we can talk about.
Yeah, for sure. Because we didn't really even go into everything.
Depth,
so,
right.
Yeah, so cool. All right. Well, we'll see you next week.
Bye.